Over 7 million different animals inhabit our planet.
So many conservation heroes out there. People that are listening right now, you are a conservation hero. The scientists out on boats, conservation heroes.
What can they teach us?
So these orcas differ in size, appearance, prey preferences, foraging techniques, dialects, behavior, and social groups.
Many species are in crisis and need your help. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.
Welcome to Our Creatures Podcast. This is Chris.
And I'm Angie.
Okay, Angie, before we jump into it, because we want to get to it as quickly as we can, we've been debating this for the last couple days, right? Like, just to let our listeners know, this was supposed to be a Patreon-only species, because in my bright idea a few weeks ago, I thought, oh, this would be cool and get people to subscribe to our Patreon, which we launched, kind of relaunched last month. You know, we have the cheetah episode out on there. We have our news segment out on there, and this was supposed to be the next species, but Angie, I can't put this species behind a paywall. I can't do it.
Yes, and luckily my phone noises are set to turn off at about 10 o'clock at night because
Sorry.
You were blowing me up. I don't even know. I didn't get him until this morning, and I'm like, whoa, he was really like having some deep thoughts last night.
I can't do it in good conscience. I can't put this.
All
I can't
about
put orcas. I can't, or killer whales. I can't do it. I mean, as much as Angie and I, this is a labor of love, especially for the listeners that have been with us from the beginning, or to our new listeners, welcome. We did this because we love them.
It's not labor if you love it, Chris.
Yes, I know. It
is, it's time consuming.
Very
best. Yeah.
This is my full-time job. I mean, it's like a full-time job, and we want to make it our career. This is now our passion. This is what we love. This is what we want to do. We believe in it. We were just rated one of the top animal podcasts in the whole world. Arguably the number one animal conservation podcast of that list. We're
absolutely
the top one there. We are almost in the top 100 again in iTunes. We're getting very close. I think we were like 120.
Yeah, that made me really happy to see that number, Chris. That's when
we're creeping in there.
It got real for me then. I was like, wow, it's more than just our moms listening.
I know. Out of the 700,000 podcasts, we're in one of the major categories, the top 100. Almost there. So I talked to Angie about it, and I was like, I can't. This is too incredible of a species, just too radical. I don't know what adjectives to use to describe them. They are just too amazing. And so for our
cosmopolitan, that's a fun one we'll talk about today.
Yes. Cultured, another one. And I couldn't do it. This has to go out to the general listenership. I promise to our Patreon subscribers, we have a backup species, which is just as amazing. We're going to record it and post it the day after this one. So stay tuned for that. But for the general people, we felt you deserved to hear this episode because these animals their story needs to be told, period. End of story.
Yes. You didn't have to twist my wrist much at all.
So this week it's orcas. And this is going to be a two-parter. Angie and I are pretty sure this is going to be a two-parter because it's going to turn into 2 hours.
Well, we'll try to behave ourselves, but I think this is the most slides I've prepared for any species so far.
Yeah,
and
me too.
It was only due to a time limit and being busy with the boys today that I didn't make it even longer. So put your seatbelts on, folks. It's going to be a long, fun ride. You're going to learn a lot. Boy.
You have to listen. You have to listen to this episode. You have to. This is going to be one of our best episodes. I already know it because I've known a lot about killer whales, but now I'm blown away. I'm blown away by the stuff I've learned about them. Just wow. As a scientist, I'm just wow. I would love, go back and get another PhD. Let's do it.
Chris, it's so funny. I thought the same thing when I was looking for my conservation organization of the week. Mm-hmm. It's a good one. Stay tuned. We'll talk about it more in part 2, but it's a good one when I'm seeing if they're hiring on their website. Like, will they take a equine physiology
Well, you did rhino, you did ungulate work.
Yes,
you went to Africa,
and I'm sure you'll get there in evolution. They were all probably kind of related, not too long ago,
way back
millions
when.
and millions of years. But yeah, so they're incredible. The behavior is just. I was up, I think, last night until midnight or 1 watching behavior videos of some of their hunting strategies and trying to start to wrap my little mind around that for and so I can share it with our audience.
Species. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's really incredible. And
yeah. I was
very
reading
relatable.
a study an hour ago.
We just covered wild dogs, not that long ago, and talking a lot about the hunting strategies and how do they communicate. Mm-hmm. And thank you to our listeners that have reached out to us to try to put us in touch with some wild dog experts to help us answer some of these dying questions that we had about how do they communicate in this amazing way. There doesn't seem to be any signaling going on, but they're blocking and pushing and chasing and switching the lead dogs like Olympic bicyclers. So, and a lot of that teamwork is seen in an orca pod, and then their families. Chris, the family.
I know.
We're going to talk about grandma killer whale and why she's so unique and so important. We'll talk a lot about the grandma hypothesis when we get to behavior. And so, yeah, it's going to be awesome. And
some of their physiology. I mean, some of their physiology.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun podcast.
And to be completely honest, you can be like me and learn why they're called killer whales and are they really even whales? Really fun stuff at cocktail parties too. So.
Yeah. So stay tuned. Stay tuned for that answer. So Angie, I guess the first thing in learning this or in really diving into the literature and doing our normal routine, or my normal routine when I prepare for a podcast. So I always go to IUCN, International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and I want to see what their status is. What are they? Are they critically endangered, vulnerable, threatened, or least concern? And I was so surprised that they were data deficient.
This is one of the most
popular animals. Yeah. The whales don't have double D's. But
no, I know.
It's
the bad kind of double D. It's that it's very rare at the IUCN. We love them. We love their work.
Yes.
I want to work for them as well. Hire us, please, please, please. We'll be awesome. But it's really striking when it's happened to us a few times, a couple species where they've got nothing. And that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but the data's it's deficient. And them as a group of scientists, a union of scientists and nature experts, they don't feel comfortable putting a number out there. And I've got to respect them for that, but it also led me to,
speechless. It left you speechless. Edit
that out. But it left. No, I didn't know where to go from there.
So here you go. So what it means, okay, and the more you understand the orcas, the more it makes sense now after doing this investigation, looking into them. So we'll get into that, why they are difficult to assess. But basically, the IUCN defines data deficiency as, quote, insufficient information for a proper assessment of conservation status to be made. This does not necessarily indicate that the species has not been extensively studied, which these whales have, but it does indicate that little or no information is available on the abundance and distribution of the species. So, in my mind, we know how many blue whales or estimates there are, things like that. These guys are a little bit tougher to study. Now, we will say, as we uncover in the podcast, there are certain pods that are critically threatened with extinction. They're on their way. They're dying. And we're going to cover that. And the big one is that everybody who pays attention to this or is in the news, the southern resident population. So we'll talk about that.
And we'll be sharing some exciting news that happened yesterday out of that pod and talk about why there is hope. So many conservation heroes out there. People that are listening right now, you are a conservation hero. The scientists out on boats, conservation heroes. The volunteers at the education centers, conservation heroes. So it gives a lot. Hopefully it'll be an uplifting pod today talking a lot about it.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of hope out there.
For sure. I just, it's amazing. Like the information's going to blow you away. Like, hopefully like it blew us away. Now, a killer whale, I think, again, most people know what a killer whale looks like. It's probably one of the most iconic animals out of the ocean. You know, black on top, white underneath, just some great white markings. You know, the bottom of their caudal fin's white, but the top's black. Then they have like a saddle spot or patch on the white on
I love
top,
that it's called a
really
saddle
cool.
spot. Yeah, that makes me happy as an equine physiologist, right?
Yeah. And then, you know, around, they have a white eye patch and some white on their pectoral fins. You know, just a beautiful, gorgeous, gorgeous animal. I think that's why people fall in love with them.
Yeah, their pattern's iconic. Maybe people seem to love panda bears, right? So something with that black and white, very uniform, clean pattern, just, it attracts us. And pandas are really cool.
It is.
Too.
Yeah, pandas are cool. Yeah.
And endangered.
Omnivore
they need
that
our
just
help
eats
as well.
bamboo.
Yeah, yikes. Check out that episode if you haven't. We've got a lot of good panda stuff out there.
Yeah, pretty fun. Now, males, and it's going to depend. We'll get there on the different pods or regions of the world. But the largest males can reach up to 32 feet long, weigh up to 11 tons. So that's almost 10 meters or 10,000 kilograms. Female is a little bit smaller, 26 feet long, 8.5 meters, weigh, 7,500 kilograms, or was that almost 8 tons? So, big. I mean, they're big, but they're not blue whale big, but they're big. They're big. And that's obviously the largest that they've seen. The averages are probably a little bit smaller than that, but, still pretty big. Now, the male, their dorsal fin can be almost 1.8 meters or 6 feet tall. I'm like, what?
Right. That's
as tall as me.
Yeah, that's you. That's
huge.
I hadn't really put that in a size perspective until reading the numbers and really thinking about it.
Yeah. And female is a little bit smaller, a meter or 3 feet, 3 to 4 feet. So, these are big ocean going animals. Now the range, this is where it's going to get interesting once I get into evolution and the different species or subspecies or what they think. The range, the oceanic range of orcas is pretty huge.
Can I use
coastal?
Can I use my fancy
Pacific?
word now? No.
Yes. Use it.
A couple different groups had described the killer whale range as the most cosmopolitan of all cetaceans.
Oh, there you go.
They might be the second most widely ranging mammal species on the planet after humans, of course. So they're found in virtually any marine ocean habitat. Of course, they prefer colder waters with higher marine productivity, but oceans all over the world.
Yeah. And, some of the white spots I have are just kind of the Central Pacific, but they go around the island. So obviously they migrate there. I think a lot of coastal regions, and it's going to depend on what they eat, which again is going to depend on the subspecies or what they think are different subspecies. I mean, coastal New Zealand, Australia, Africa, Asia, South America, North America, and in between.
Yes.
Huge range.
Right. A huge range. And just a little formality as far as you mentioned, they migrate. It's not, researchers technically don't think that they migrate. But like a lot of the other whales where people will go whale watching during certain seasons to watch their different migrations. I've had the blessing of being on the big island of Hawaii from a hotel room and seeing the whales migrate, the humpbacks migrating up north in the springtime up to their feeding grounds. Killer whales, unlike other whales that have these seasonal migration patterns, they tend to just go where their food source is. So when we talk about studying some of their behaviors, and of course, as Chris mentioned previously, the population, it's very difficult because they're not predictable, or they're not as predictable as some of the other whale species.
Right. I mean, like pretty soon, I think blue whales are going to be off my coast, and I'm going. I'm
Oh,
going to see a blue whale.
Yes,
Yeah.
and get some video.
Oh,
and today, since we'll be talking so much behavior, now you'll know what all the different behaviors are called. By the end of this podcast, you should know the difference between a tail slap and a fin.
I'll be on the boat being like, and there's a rostrum of a blue whale.
You're totally going to be that
like,
guy.
who's
Yes,
this guy?
be that guy with your clipboard. Like the guy with the clipboard at the baseball game.
Yes, that's me.
One of my buddies does that. He like takes the old school sheet to the baseball game to mark innings and balls and hits and strikeouts and stuff. So that'll be you with your clipboard sheet to see if you can see all the different behaviors.
I'm going to time between breaths and stuff. Okay. Now how deep do you think they can go? Well, do you know blue whales? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I'll bore them. They'll throw me overboard. All right. Now why care about killer whales? I think, or orcas. A lot of people love these animals, period. Bottom line, around the world, these are one of the most beloved creatures I think we have on Earth. It's top 5 by far. By far. You know, I still love elephants the most, but these guys are kind of inching out those rhinos and
well,
species.
I was gonna say, when you were texting me in the middle of the night, like, oh my gosh, orcas are amazing. We have to make this public. I'm like, what? Uh-oh, elephants, you better watch out. Chris has got
They're
new
close.
love.
I know. I'm
like, elephants, he's cheating on you.
Oh gosh. They're just amazing.
Chris, you have one of the biggest hearts of anybody I know. You can love both elephants and orcas.
Okay. So I have an ocean species and a land species. Okay.
Yes. That's good.
Shout out to my friend Warren, who's like the biggest octopus fan on earth. You know, we're going to have him on the pod here soon. He's going to try to convert me, but I'm sorry. I mean, octopuses are cool, but these orcas are just, oh my goodness.
Well, Chris, I will give a little bit of a spoiler alert for this podcast. Mentioning octopus, before we even do octopus, the little bit that I know about them, I think if the octopus had a vertebrae, they would rule the world. So that's a side note for a different day. We're going to talk about that soon. Now, however, reading about killer whales and trying to even just grasp this past week, I need more time. You need more time. We need to read more books. That's quite clear. Talk to more people, more specialists, things like that, experts. But they're so amazing. And I had that thought. I said, wow, if they had legs and they could crawl out of the ocean, they would win, I think.
Yeah.
I think they could take over the world. And my goodness, maybe they should.
Yeah.
Shoot, the state the world's in now. We could
stop watching the news.
I know. We could use an orca in charge.
I know. So, why care? I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, obviously this is a top predator of the ocean, so just very critical to ocean health. You know, that's the big thing. I mean, end of story. Sure. That should be why. But, and after you go, I want to talk a little bit about the southern resident population, but the thing, like I said, that's the reason my jaw hit the ground last night reading some of these behavior studies was evidence of culture. And that's going to probably be in part 2. And you're going to want to hear this. Because you mentioned it a few pods ago, and I can't remember exactly what species it was, but we were talking, you're like, culture, and they think they might have culture, but that's such a different discussion for a different day. Well, that day is now, I think, to an extent.
Touché. I love it. Good. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, why care? Why care about orcas?
Because they're amazing. They have amazing behavior. And you obviously touched on it, that is, we need to know more about them. And when I get on to part 2, as far as some of their behavior and reproductive behavior, there's still a lot of holes missing because we need to study them more because they are somewhat elusive and there's still a lot that we don't know. But we do know is that they are an apex predator. They're amazing hunters. You're going to learn all about that. They literally have different hunting styles depending on if they're hunting fish, sea lions, narwhals. I will talk about narwhals in episode 2. They hunt those guys. But they know what they need to do to survive and they are hanging on. They're dealing with our unhealthy oceans and our sound pollution and our overfishing but it's our job now to help them.
Right.
To help them be safe, to help them have nutritious food and be in clean, pollution-free water. They deserve that. All the species of the ocean, from the littlest coral to the biggest whale.
Yeah,
but like you mentioned, unfortunately, not a lot of the fish or coral or even some of the whale species capture the populations and ignite such passion and passionate discussions as much as orcas do. And if you were maybe a little bit like me before listening to this podcast, you just hadn't really, you're like, oh, they're cool, but you hadn't really thought a lot about them or what their numbers look like, their conservation issues, their incredible physiology and amazing behavior. Hopefully after today, you'll be like me and you'll be on the bandwagon looking for jobs on a boat next summer.
Studying orcas.
Well, and then of course, and then the biggest goal I think that Chris and I have for this podcast, is, as much as we would love to monetize it with Patreon, and things like that, so I don't have to work my 4 or 5 jobs, depending on if you count cleaning horse stalls, which my husband does.
$2 an hour.
Oh no, it's 10, so it's all right.
$10. Okay.
But is that it's about sharing. It's about getting other people excited. It's about taking somebody who has no appreciation for orcas and giving them appreciation. It's like taking somebody like me that had a good amount of appreciation for orcas and is now a huge fan, or it's one of your new loves. Like it's rivaling elephants. So share this podcast and let people know. And we're going to give you a lot of websites and things like that where you can check out some of their cool behavior and learn more about them. And Chris, of course, will provide excellent show notes as he always does. So check those out. But yeah, we're going to get you, if we haven't already convinced you about why to care, stick with us. We'll get you there.
Yeah. It's an amazing species, and they're in trouble. I mean, we know they're in trouble. Now, when I say that, Julie's been reminding me to stay positive, and there is a lot of good information out there. So
that's why we love her. Thank you, Julie.
Not all of it is bad news, folks.
Don't let Chris go dark. That's not
not going dark.
Nobody wants that.
I'm not going dark. We are conservation optimism. I love it. It trends on Instagram. I post it all the time. Conservation optimism. We're gonna clean the oceans. And there's some cool stuff too. So wait for the end. But okay, so we're going to look at a microcosm of what this species is going through. So the most, I think, well-studied population is this southern resident population. And I'm going to get to what that means because it's in the Pacific Northwest, and to most of the planet, that's not south, but to Alaska, it is. So that's the southern resident population. Now I've took some of this data from the Endangered Species Coalition website. There's going to be a ton of websites on these show notes, I promise you. So the good news was in 2005, in the U.S., we covered them under the Endangered Species Act, which we need to uphold. So remind yourself, vote for environmental stuff. Anyways, that's a whole different topic.
Vote green. Vote with your dollar.
Yes.
Vote green.
Yeah. But this is one of the most critically endangered marine mammals in the United States, this population. In 1995, they reached a peak of 98 total animals. That has declined to 76, and now there's less than 30 breeding members. This is what's really sad. Of the 6 babies that were born in they call it quote unquote baby boom years in between 2014 and 2016, half have died.
Yes,
Not
and
a
that
single
is
baby
actually
born.
just, and just in general, that is what they think it is for a lot of the populations.
Right. Okay.
About
So it's
50%
average. That's
mortality
normal.
rate. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's good. Okay. So we'll just give facts.
From my understanding of the literature, if other orca experts out there, we're looking for some, let us know if it's different with other populations. But I think, and from what we know from the little bit of research, but this southern resident killer whale population, we do know a lot about because they've been tracked for decades.
Right. Yeah.
By amazing scientists and out of California and state of Washington.
Right. So there's 3 main reasons, okay, that there's a decline. And this one's what is concerning: noise pollution. So ocean-going vessels coming in and out of Puget Sound up there in Seattle and Vancouver, and then the Canadian government wanting to run the pipeline to Vancouver so you get more oil and gas ships coming in and out of that part of the world. That is a major concern for them. Then you have chemical pollution. So pollutants that we're dumping into the oceans, PCBs, other things that accumulate in the tissues of not only the orcas, but the things they eat. So that's messing up their physiology, immune system, endocrine system. So that all has effects on their health and well-being. So, and then it all leads up to a lack of food. There's just not a lot of food for them in that part of the world. So there is a big decline. Now, our friend Jonathan up there in the wilds of British Columbia, Angie, he wants us to do salmon.
I think we have to now.
We do.
Is he a Patreon? Maybe that's the next species I'll do for Patreon.
That poor guy, like he's like who's the old wilderness guy? You know, he lives in like
just
out
kidding.
in the wilderness.
We'll do salmon for you. Not on Patreon, Jonathan. He'll
send
you
your
work.
Yeah, Jonathan's awesome. He's out in the wilds of British Columbia, but he, you know, talking about salmon. So these whales, that is primarily their diet, Chinook salmon. It's more than 80% of their diet. So nutritional stress, Angie, you know this from reproduction and some of the work you did. When you're pregnant, oh God, this would turn into a 5-hour podcast on this topic alone. Especially with me, you know me, because I did some of this work too. When a woman's pregnant, she needs to eat and eat well. Not, you know, we've talked about this a few times on the podcast. So anyways, long story short, if you're pregnant, please eat, have a healthy diet, take your vitamins, your prenatal vitamins, eat a healthy diet. If you don't, your offspring are going to suffer long-term health consequences when they're 40, 50, 60. It's proven science, whatever. So with the lack of salmon up there in that part of the world, there's a lot of stress on these females that are pregnant. So the calves mortality probably goes up, or they're not getting pregnant. And a lot of this is like our good friend Corbin. I think he posted a picture today on the Snake River. So the Columbian River, the Snake River, some of these major rivers coming out of Oregon, Washington, and I'm not so sure on British Columbia, but they're dammed up. So that's hugely influencing Chinook salmon, where they can't spawn and you're getting less salmon in the oceans, things like that. So Jonathan, it's on our radar, I promise you. So that is a big problem, is because of human activity, you're reducing the fish population, which in turn, the top predator, here we go, food webs are being negatively influenced. The other thing that makes me so sad about this story, but it's good news. I promise you, Julie, it's good news.
It's coming, girl. It's coming.
Back in the 60s, they used to shoot these whales, especially in the Pacific Northwest, because they were so scared of them. Yes, they were feared, and they were competitors to fish, so they shot and killed them. And so in the 60s and 70s, you had a huge influence on that population. So you're talking, when we get to culture and learning and behavior, all the older members of the pod being killed off, and none of that information being passed on to the next generation. So it really wasn't until people started to fall in love with orcas did that activity cease. So now that it's illegal, it still happens, but it's illegal. Now, here's some good news, right?
Yes, there's actually great news for the J-pod. And so just briefly, the southern resident killer whale population is divided into the J-pod, the K-pod, and the L-pod, because they're different families. And we're going to talk a lot more about families and what the importance of that is as far as their communication and hunting and longevity, things like that. But as Chris had mentioned, there hadn't been a calf, so a baby killer whale, born since 2016. And so when you combine the J-pod, K-pod, and L-pod families together, there had been about 75 total whales. Total. So 22 in the J-pod, 18 in the K-pod, 35 in the L-pod. And there hadn't been any births in any of those pods of these southern resident killer whales since 2016. And so, of course, that's making researchers like, what the heck is going on? And people are really looking into it. And there's been a lot more press, which is a good thing. But the amazing news is just a couple days ago, a new baby orca has been born to the J-pod. And once again, this is one of the 3 critically endangered southern resident pods. And super exciting because this is the second calf born in 2019.
That's good.
Yeah, it's so amazing. The other one was born to the L-pod in January. So 2 since 2019, and it just gives me goosebumps thinking about it. And now these calves, we do know that there's a high mortality rate. But so far the calf that was born, L77 that was born in January of 2019. Seems to be doing okay. And our fingers crossed for this new calf, born just days ago from the J-pod. But really hopeful signs. But Chris will post some links to it on our show notes so you can read all about it if you haven't already heard the great news.
Yeah, for sure I will. Because we do need to spread the good news. And there is good stuff. And I think with the press and with the public attention to it, that hopefully they still get those protections and they can come up with some conservation plans. And I'm sure they are. Absolutely sure they are.
Yes. Yeah. And just to get you excited to keep listening about orcas and potentially even to tune into part 2 is with these pods, the J, Ks, and the Ls, it's very centered around family. And what's just blew my mind in general as I'm learning more about this, and Chris, of course, will touch more about it. Each southern resident pod uses distinct dialects of calls or sounds to communicate. Yeah, and we're going to talk a lot more about that. I know, it's so insane.
It's insane.
Now, but interestingly, a couple of calls are shared between the 3 pods, like yelling at your neighbor, maybe across the street, like, hey, pick up your garbage, or hey, it's, free beer day down at the local, whatever. I don't know what they are, obviously. And researchers think that that these calls are unlike any other calls used by other communities or pods of killer whales.
That is a big discussion in part 2. That is a huge discussion in part 2.
Like,
because
what? That's crazy and awesome. And
that's the
I'm in
stuff
love.
that I was reading, and that's why I was like, there's no way I'm paywall in this episode. There's no way. This has to be told. This story has to be told. All right. So whale evolution, we covered this in narwhals a little bit. We covered this in blue whales.
And just a little self-promotion is that if you haven't checked out Narwhals, please do. It's actually one of our top downloaded podcasts, so people love it. So if you haven't listened to it, listen and let us know what you think.
Yeah, and even, 70 pods ago, we did blue whales, and that's still one of my favorites. Like, that was an amazing
that was
species. Over a year ago. So, the theory of cetacean basically evolves. They were related to the mesnokids. The thing is, the reason I love this ancient animal was it was a carnivorous ungulate. I don't know if you remember this. So
I do.
It was like wolves with hooves.
Which kind of makes sense because killer whales are when I got to behavior, I was going to relate that like wolves of the sea, wolves of the ocean.
For sure.
So it makes sense.
Sure. So this, whales kind of evolved the subcontinent of India 50 million years ago. 30 million years ago, toothed whales and baleen whales separated out. Now, obviously the baleen whales, that's the blue whales, the humpback, they're the filter feeders. And then you have the toothed whales, which is obviously the orcas. And then the narwhals, which we covered. You can think of sperm whales, which we'll cover at some point in the future. Now, the interesting thing about this is of the tooths. Obviously you have dolphins, but then you have oceanic dolphins. So that is where orcas belong, which started forming about 11 million years ago. So they're actually a dolphin. I'm going to get to it here in a second. Then you have the narwhals, beluga, which we covered, the porpoises. Then you have the river dolphins, the Chinese, the Amazon river dolphin, which was one of our very first episodes, and the La Plata dolphin. So the oceanic dolphins, you have the false killer whale, the pilot whales, and then some of the other oceanic dolphin in the family, which is 35 species.
Right.
And it's the Delphinidae family. Huge.
Yes.
Now, do we have specifics on killer whales? No. Again, remember, evolution on an oceanic species is very difficult. We're not down there at the ocean floor, looking for fossils, which I don't even think really formed down there. So they have to be on land. But they do know that the most closest relative to orcas was about 250,000 years ago. So modern orcas have been around about that long. Okay. I wanted to get through that quickly because this is why we're going to be a 2-hour podcast. And that is the quote unquote.
Well, let me actually jump in really quick. I'm just going to go into a little bit more to answer my kind of precursor about, because I have a few differences from whales.
Okay. Yeah.
So Chris, to answer my question earlier in the podcast, the killer whale is not a whale.
Liar. I don't believe you.
Right?
No, why? Okay,
I know,
tell me
it's
why.
crazy.
Tell me why.
Like you said, they are a type of oceanic dolphin. And
Right.
although their name, of course, Chris is going to touch on a little bit more why they're named killer whales and things like that. So to begin with, if you look up their physical makeup, just their appearance, they look more similar to a dolphin than they do a whale. Their head shape is more bulbous or beak-like, and they're more streamlined, and thus they're more aerodynamic with their movements, this compact kind of physique, if you will. And then size. We talked about that, yes, they are big, with especially as Chris mentioned, them having a dorsal fin potentially up to 6 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
But compared to a whale, they're not that big. And so the orcas are definitely the largest of all the dolphin species. But yeah, compared to a blue whale, it's not even close, right?
No.
The other physiology I know Chris is going to touch on a lot and here in a little bit, so I won't go too much into the weeds. But it's a good time to mention that orcas use echolocation in order to communicate with one another. It's like a biological sonar, and we'll go into the physiology of how they do that because it's just incredible and what it means, which is basically a biological sonar. It helps them navigate and communicate. It's pretty cool. And so we'll talk more about that. So yeah, I think if you take a second look at them and really compare features, it makes sense that they're in the dolphin family. It makes sense. Their name is just tricky, right?
They're a whale. Anyways, moving on. No, it is. You're right. You're right. Technically speaking, scientifically speaking, that's how we present information.
Sure. Well, and
right.
go
ahead and.
Oh, they go by a lot of. Oh.
I was gonna say I was gonna say take off your headphones, and then I'm just gonna say Angie was right.
Oh, I was really about
okay, moving on.
I was really like,
you really were going to take your headphones off.
Yeah. I was like, okay.
You were right.
But we should name too that they're also, they also have a lot of other names, including orca. We mentioned killer whale, blackfish, grampus. That was a new one to me. And killer. Just straight up killer.
Killer.
So there you go.
It fits with what they do. So yeah. Okay. Their scientific name is Orcinus orca. So there you go. That's how we'll call them. Now, Angie, this is again one of the reasons I was just like, no way, we have to put this information out, because there is a lot of emerging data in the last, few decades since they've started studying this, that there could be different species of orca. Now, right now they're saying subspecies, but when I go through some of this, they think there might be one pod or one type that is actually a different species. And I just was like, what? Like, you just think, okay, they're pods, they're family groups. No, they are totally different, and it's very complex. So let me just set it up like this. So they call these ecotypes. So these orcas differ in size, appearance, prey preferences, foraging techniques, dialects, behavior, and social groups. Now, what's also interesting is their ranges do overlap, but they do not interbreed. They don't interact. They avoid each other like the plague.
What?
These different ecotypes. Yes.
Drop the mic. Now, I'm out. That's incredible.
Like, seriously. Yeah. Seriously. This is, whoa. This is what really made my head spin. Now, Dr. Michael Biggs was the big orca researcher in the 1970s.
There you go. Good job.
Yeah. he's the father of modern orca research. And now today it's probably mostly mothers out there that are doing most of the research, like Angie and all her friends. So I'm going to kind of divide this up into the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. I know. Yeah, I know. So we started off talking about the southern resident orcas, and that's because there's a group or a potential subspecies called resident orcas. Okay, so there's the northern, which is more near Alaska, and then the southern, which can actually come down to California. But, like we know, that one pod that's up there in the Pacific Northwest. Now, these are fish specialists. So their ranges aren't as big, and they specialize in eating fish. So this is again where it gets really interesting. These don't go hunt seals really. They don't look for other things. They might, but mostly, like I said, 80% of their diet is salmon. Now, the northern resident, they eat all sorts of type of fish, and like I said, the southern resident is like specifically Chinook salmon. Northerns will eat halibut, cod, some of those other things.
Some squid sometimes I read. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's the resident, okay, and more coastal. Now, another ecotype named after Dr. Biggs is the Biggs orcas. Now, these are transient orcas, so they go deeper water. Now, these are mammal-eating orcas. So they eat whales, probably narwhals, but minke whales.
Seals.
Harbor seals. These ones I did see, this was a long time ago, like a decade plus ago. National Geographic had a bunch of photos of them hunting a blue whale, and like it was really crazy. When we get to hunting strategies, but eating whales, they range again from Southern California up to the Arctic Circle. I think these might be the ones that eat great white sharks. I'll get to that, which is really cool.
And I think it's really interesting with the transient is their saddle patch often has a lot of black coloring.
They have physiological differences. Yeah, or phenotypes. Like, just to get to this one pod that blow you away. Now, staying in the North Pacific, there is another third ecotype found, or a fourth, I guess, with the Biggs, and that's called the offshore. And these ones are very elusive, so there's not a lot that they know about them. They're very far from land. They don't even know what they eat, their social structure, and they go from Southern California to the Bering Sea. So somewhere there in the Pacific. Now we're still in the Northern Hemisphere. So what is that? 4? Right?
3.5.
Okay,
yeah.
that's 3.
Well,
3.
The Biggs
okay,
are
3.
a type of transient. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Got it. So we have the resident orcas, the Biggs, then you have the offshore. So those are the 3 main ones in the Pacific. Now in the Atlantic, there's 2 types. There's North Atlantic type 1, and these are smaller than that large size that we talked about. So again, the phenotype's different. They're generalists. They eat herring, mackerel, other things around Norway, Iceland, Scotland. Okay. And sometimes eat seals. They're just like a generalist feeder. The North Atlantic type 2 is primarily eats whales and dolphins. So again, a different phenotype. Their eye patches are different. So you have the North Atlantic type 1, the North Atlantic type 2. So one eats fish, the other eats mammals and whales. Okay, so that is 5 different types of orcas in the Northern Hemisphere. Now we go to the Southern Hemisphere, and it just keeps going. So the type A is probably the largest ones in the Southern Hemisphere. These hunt minke whales. They go from Antarctica out. So they follow them everywhere. Very large. Type B also is large. These are the ones, Angie. Did you ever watch Frozen Planet? So there's it's Frozen Planet, Planet Earth. There's an amazing sequence of whales that they're chasing this crab eater around this little iceberg, and the crab eater is like fighting for its life. Crab eater seal. And it makes it. The seal makes it. They give up. Because it just keeps circling this small little like thing. It's crazy how they don't.
I watched a video last night about them going after a baby blue whale.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, but they 2 hours, 2 hours trying to drown this thing, and we'll get the behaviors. Yeah. Make sure you stay tuned for part 2 episode. And they didn't. No, the mom that mama whale was like and
came in.
The calf was fine, but. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how they that one that they must have gotten in the Pacific must have been sick or something. Anyways, what's cool about these, so Frozen Planet, you see them on some of these nature shows, especially out of the BBC. These are the ones that also do the cooperative wave washing hunting technique. Are you going to talk about that?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay, I'll save it.
Don't give it away. Don't give it away.
I won't. But it's
incredible.
Insane. That's the type Bs. Then you have the type B smalls.
Did they just get lazy with like first they had names and then they went to type 1, type 2. Now they're just like A, B,
these
C,
ones
D.
They have Gerlache. which is the Kurlash Strait of Antarctica.
Okay.
And so they actually have
so we're type B.0, 2.0.
Yeah. This is small type B.
Small type B. Okay.
So these ones eat penguins. Okay. I know people, we're getting there. We're almost towards the end. These also eat seals and penguins. Okay. Type C. So now a different one. Again, they look different. They eat different things. They don't interact. It's insane. These are Eastern Antarctica off the Ross Seas. They eat fish. Okay. This is the one. Okay.
Is this the
This
new
is the one that just type D?
The newest
Yes.
one. Like,
well, they've
been
known
in the
about
headlines
it. So
a lot recently.
Yeah, they just published a study on them that
It has a different head shape.
So, yes.
Okay. Cool.
So
it was worth the wait. It was worth the wait then.
Yes.
I'm just teasing. This is super fast.
These ones are these ones are so different. So they have known about them because there was a mass stranding in New Zealand in the 50s. And they were like, what the heck are these things? They do not look like normal orcas. You're right. They had the shorter dorsal fin. Their heads are rounder, bulbous. They're small eye patches. Very unique. Very unique. And they're just very elusive. There's been very few sightings of them. Now, these ones eat fish and mainly fish specialists, but you're right. There was just an article on them, right? That they did study a group and looking at the physiology of them, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was in a lot of my news feeds. And it was really, now I know my news feeds are super animal dorky. So maybe not everybody was getting that, but it was blowing up my news feed. Really cool. And I was going to, on news conservation for our Patreon listeners, it was, spoiler alert, it was going to be one of my not
stories.
New species, because it's technically not, it's all this rigmarole as you'd mentioned, but I mean, it's 2019 and we're still like, what are these? Where are these? How are they related? How are they so different? So it's pretty cool, exciting stuff, because that's a huge megafauna in the ocean to not know anything about, right?
Yeah, I know. I was blown away. That's 5 in the southern hemisphere. That's 5 in the northern hemisphere. And they may split out even more. They don't know. Sure. They have to do the DNA and genetic testing.
You bring up a very valid point. Exactly. Yeah. Like, what else is out there that we don't know a lot about?
And it's definitely,
and that's why, if you don't care, that's why you should care. Like, that is,
I know.
That's why we have to save our oceans. And orcas is, of course, an iconic kind of the panda bear, if you will, of why care about marine animals or mammals. But man, there's still a lot of uncharted territory, and we can't let these guys go extinct without learning about them. For goodness' sake.
No way. It's literally like human culture. And I know in part 2, we'll get more into the culture debate, but you think about how we as a species have, gone across the planet, and you have Europeans and Africans and Asians and then Australians. They're all weird down there. Just kidding. I'm not talking about the Aborigines. I'm talking about the Australians that got shipped over from England. You better be nice.
They're one of our main supporters.
I love my Aussies. Are you kidding me? Oh, I love them so much. Me and my brother go back and forth because he lived there for a while. It just Australia, how they butchered the English language, blah, blah, blah. It's funny. We love our Aussies. We love them, love them, love them. And trust me, Aussies can throw it right back at you. They are sharp as a whip. They are amazing. I love our Aussies. So, it's just, but it really makes you think that these are different, not species. It's just, I don't know. We'll get to it with the culture. My brain was blown away. That's why I was like, oh my God, Angie, texting you late last night. All right. So the largest whale, obviously, the largest animal ever to live on the face of the earth is
the blue whale.
Yeah. So we covered that. Episode 26. Check it out. It was very fun. We were just hitting our groove then.
Do you know these numbers by heart? Do you have them memorized, or do you have to look it up? I'm just wondering. You're making me feel bad about myself. If you asked me what blue whale is, I would say like Not in the last couple months, but I would have no idea. So you always impress me. That's just, you're a numbers guy. You always impress me.
We do. Okay. So we did that one in March of 2018. I had been living in New Zealand for a couple months. And then we had an amazing interview with Dr. Kim Getz that week. And she's from NIWA.
Awesome interview.
Yeah. And she, please check it out if you haven't. That was amazing. She's tracking blue whales off New Zealand.
She has her dream job. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to go work on her boat. So yeah, that was a fun one to cover. So I had to go and look at the smallest whale ever. Can you guess how long it is?
Ooh, stump the chump. 6 feet.
Okay, 9 feet. So
whoa, that's better than I expected.
You're close. Yeah, almost 3 meters.
I just totally pulled that one out of my you-know-where.
2.7 meters total length, weighs up to 600 pounds or 270 kilograms, and that is the dwarf sperm whale.
Cool.
Really cool looking, really unique looking. In the warmer tropical oceans, here you go. Here's another thing that will make you drop the mic. And we have to, again, another species we probably have to look at. When threatened, the dwarf sperm whale produces a dark red ink similar to octopus.
Really?
And it's from its body, and it's used, they think, to disorient or blind attackers so it can escape. Like, what? It's like pooping your pants. It literally poops its pants or something. I don't know. Maybe that's why we do it. So it's like, oh, you're stinky. We don't want to attack you. I don't know.
Huh.
But it ejects this red ink and it's just crazy physiology. All right. A few more things and we're going to wrap up part 1. Because part 2, if we don't have you excited for part 2 yet, then I don't know what to tell you. Just really quickly, so there is some controversy on how long these whales live, and I'll tell you why. Okay. So what is known?
Data deficient, the double D's.
I agree with that. I think that's what it is. It is. But generally they think male killer whales live around 30 years, but can live up to 50 or 60 years old. Females usually live to be 50, but in some cases they've seen one that's 90 years old. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now this is going back and forth. It's because it's based on one study produced starting in the 1970s out of the Pacific Northwest, our southern resident population that they've been studying, Dr. Biggs and his group. So they've been able to age these whales, but like I told you, where the study has some holes is that population was not hunted for meat or anything, but they were killed. They were killed off shot and killed. So you have this group that you don't have probably some of the older members there. And then they're under a lot of credible stress.
Right.
Which isn't, we all know stress is bad for aging. So this is the only study we have. And this study was published in 2006. So we don't have a lot of data, and people are saying you need to go study some of these other transient, but how? How do you age a whale? I don't know. I don't know
either. Yeah.
No. So it's been really difficult. There is ways, and I'm not going to get into the geeky science of it. It's basically with all the radiation in the atmosphere, we can measure that in cells, and that can tell us an age of a cell. There you go. Angie's not even listening. It's so geeky science.
No, I love geeky science. I do.
Do you? Okay. 60 seconds. You and Julie, 60 seconds or less. This is a cool thing, and I looked into this, especially looking at aging oocytes.
Telomeres.
Because
the answer's always either telomeres or kispectin.
No.
The answer's always kispectin.
No. Telomeres, you're right. Telomere length. This is, we're gonna almost end it on this. And so people, if you want some cool science.
And for the record, kispectin is Anna and I's inside joke about repro. It's a hormone.
Everybody's looking at it.
Everybody's studying it. So in any of my exams, just if you didn't know the answer, you put kispectin. and you get it right. All right. Here's how we can age cells. Okay.
All right. Before, this is really cool.
You have my attention. I was looking at my dog sleeping, but now I'm with you.
Okay. So listen, Angie, let me tell you. Let me give you a teaching moment. It's only because I wanted to do a study on this. All right. So what happened is before the nuclear age, there was no, is it carbon-14? It's one of the radioactive carbons. And I was looking at this like 4 or 5 years ago. Okay. So I think it's carbon-14. It's one of the radioactive carbons. Okay. After we started the nuclear age, started dropping nukes, testing nukes and dumping all of this radiation and high levels of this radioactive carbon in the atmosphere, was taken up by trees. So we can look at it in tree rings, right? So if you go back 100 years, you cut a tree, you can go and measure the amounts in tree rings. That's where they set up their baseline. Then they can go into they've done it in human tissues and I think some animal tissues, and they can measure. So there's a radiation decay rate. You know that, right? So
of course, half-life.
It was peaked in like the 50s. Yeah, whatever it was. Peaked in the 50s, and now it's been decaying ever since we've stopped nuclear testing. Thank goodness. So
that we know
people
about.
that are say are 50 years old, they have somebody that was born in 1950 have their cells took up that carbon, right? That's how we make cells. And so there's a radiation signature in that cell as long as it's still alive. So certain brain cells are alive throughout your life, right? Mm-hmm. So then you can go and they looked at an aging cells throughout the body to see how long they lived based on that decay rate. So things like your intestinal wall, it lives about 2 weeks, but certain brain
quickly
skin. So certain things in your brain are with you for life.
Oh, here's a fun fact.
Years.
How long does an adipocyte, a fat cell, live?
Forever, because I can't get rid of them.
Close. Close. There's a reason it's so hard to get rid of them. They're about 10 years. So when you do lose weight, you're actually not losing that fat cell. It's just shrinking down. It's waiting for you to eat that darn cupcake.
Thanks. We're supposed to be positive on this.
Oh, sorry. I forget. Keep going. Okay.
But you make a good point. So there's adipocytes that we've had for 10 years. The radiation in that carbon.
If my adipocytes could talk, what they would tell you.
So we could theoretically get skin samples on some of these killer whales and actually do that radiation study and see how old they are. There you go. But
you can't because skin cells don't live that long.
Yeah, you're right. Never mind. Okay. It was okay. Never mind. Anyways, I went down that rabbit hole. Thank you for joining us for part 1. We're going to come back and start part 2, and you want to stay tuned because I still haven't answered why they got the name killer whale, and you have to listen about the culture. It is astounding.
And
so
the hunting.
Thank you for joining us. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Facebook, All Creatures Podcast. Please, please share this episode with friends. People that are doing that, we love you. It is helping us. Our numbers are starting to grow really quickly. We love you. We thank you. And we'll be back next week.
Thank you for your time.
Listen, learn, share. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.